Hi, students. Today we're going to be looking at Alexander and the Hellenistic Age. That is none other than Alexander the Great. So this is going to be an important lesson that we're going to go through. Chapter 4, Section 5. Make sure you got your notes out and you're ready to go. We'll be going through Alexander, learning about the Hellenistic Age, and also this is going to be critical because our next big writing assignment, our next big DBQ, which will be starting at the end of the week, is going to be on none other than Alexander. So it's important that you kind of have a good background base for him. Our objectives in this lesson, explaining how Alexander built an extensive empire. We've looked at a lot of big empires, and it seems like they always build on each other. The next biggest, the next biggest. Well, Alexander's going to get the new record for the largest empire in the ancient world, even outmatching what the Persians were able to accomplish. We're going to describe not only did Alexander's empire grow to be very large, but it also, even more important than the size, was the impact of spreading the Greek culture across a huge part of the world at the time. And then we're also going to be looking at beyond Alexander. After Alexander died, his influence and the influence of Greek learned people really continued to spread for a long time, and that's the Hellenistic Age. Here's the terms and people. Make sure that you do include these in your notes. You add these to your notes. You're going to notice a lot of them are people this time. And they continue right here with some of the important Hellenistic people. Here's our focus question that you're going to write down. How did Alexander the Great expand his empire and spread his culture throughout his huge realm? We're going to be looking at how Athens takes a step down. Athens stops being the major power of Greece around 338. And the people who take up that role are the Macedonians. And the Macedonians are the kingdom that Alexander is in charge of. Still Greek people, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The big thing Alexander does is he spreads the culture of Greece. So Greece's culture is not just located in a small area, but the area of Greek influence really expands. All right, so to talk about Alexander the Great, we first must talk about Alexander's dad. And Alexander's dad, this guy right here, is Philip II of Macedon. And the Macedonian Empire, you can see, Macedonia is right in this location right here, if you can see my arrow. It is in northern Greece. And the Macedonians were definitely Greek people. However, they were more on the outside edges of Greece, and a lot of the Greek city-states didn't look at Macedonia the same way that they looked at themselves. However, Philip takes over and becomes quite the conqueror and quite the successful conqueror up here in Macedonia. He definitely has an eye on conquering, and his number one area that he really wants to conquer is Greece. He goes down into Greece and does successfully conquer most and much of Greece. You can see really the only area of Greece down here that he didn't conquer is the city-state of Sparta. Just wasn't worth it, to be quite honest. You know how the Spartans fought. However, Philip's goal of really expanding his empire, expanding this Greek Macedonian empire, not only to Greece, but he really had his eyes on the Persian Empire, which is right over here to the east. And he wanted to move over here and start conquering, but that goal really ended when he was assassinated at his daughter's wedding. Here you can see a picture, at least from a movie, of Philip. One infamous thing about Philip is that he took a battle wound arrow, I believe, to the eye, and famously just kind of, at least according to historians at the time, just kind of pulled it out and kept right fighting. Just a really, really bad dude, and in a fighting kind of a good way. Anyway, his son at the time when he was assassinated was quite young. His son named Alexander, and of course, when dad dies, Alexander takes over as the next ruler of Greece. At the time that Alexander took over, he was very young, but His entire life had been spent around his dad, who was a conqueror, and Alexander had, even though he was only around 20 when he took over the throne, he already had a lot of experience with fighting, battle tactics, and empire building taught to him from his dad. And when his dad died, Alexander kind of took it as a goal of life to make the Greek Empire, make the Macedonian Empire just so much bigger. He starts with his eyes on Persia, just like his dad had. Persia is directly to the east of Greece, and if you remember back into the times of conflict in the Greek Empire, there's a history here. There's a history between the Greeks and the Persians, and this history is uh, hateful. The Greeks hate the Persians hate the Greeks right back. And so this is going to be an obvious place for Alexander to move into and start to conquer. Alexander takes the Greek fighting style, the Greek technology, takes it even to a better extent, and starts marching into Persia. Now, when he does that, he really picked a good time to take on the Persians. You know, the Persians were at a point where their emperor was weaker than some of the previous emperors, and some of the cities around in Persia started to rebel. You know, it was the Greeks who gave cities in Persia that idea, really, that the Persians could be defeated, that the Persians could be challenged. And so a lot of the cities in the Persian Empire were starting to rebel a little bit. Well, when Alexander marches in, people see that. Some of the other cities and provinces in Persia see that, and they look at this as an opportunity to get rid of the Persian Empire. So a lot of these areas actually come to Alexander's aid. He starts moving into Persia, conquers part of Persia. He actually, you can see some of the travels here. He not only goes through Persia and starts conquering here in Asia Minor, but his next step is he moves into Egypt and takes over the Egyptian Empire with the most important city at the time in Egypt of Alexandria. We're going to talk more about, well, he renames it Alexandria. Guess who he named it after? If you look at the empire that Alexander is able to conquer, which is vast, you can see not only where he started over here in Macedonia and Greece, but takes over all of Asia Minor, goes down here into Egypt, takes over parts of Egypt, goes through Palestine, moves over here into the Middle East and takes it all over, continues to go all the way over here to the easternmost part. This is the Indus River, literally takes over parts of India. This is by far the largest empire ever conquered by one ruler. And one other thing to look at here, Alexandria, 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 Alexandropolis, different, and Alexandria. These are a lot of towns founded by Alexander, and as you can see, wasn't exactly humble about his naming of these cities. Alexander was very proud of his accomplishments and definitely wanted people to know about it. Another thing about Alexander, as he's conquering all this land, is he's bringing this Greek knowledge with him and this Greek culture with him. And he's very, very interested in making sure that the places he takes over are able to share in the culture that he's bringing. Well, it kind of ends over here in the India area. At this point, Alexander's soldiers had been fighting straight for over 8 years. That is no trip back home, no break. Imagine these soldiers, many of them were tired of fighting. They just wanted to return to their homeland, return to their families. And they start to rebel finally in India. His soldiers say, no, we're not going any further. Alexander had designs on taking over all of India, but his soldiers, no, they decided to turn back. Alexander had no choice but to go along with them, leaving some troops and some commanders in India to keep the land. He turns around, goes back, and as he's heading back into Persia, he starts planning his newest campaign. He's like, okay, when I get back, get a fresh group of soldiers, this is what I'm going to do next. And unfortunately, never was able to accomplish that. Takes ill. Some people think maybe it died of a fever, but some people think perhaps he picked up some sort of a disease or other type of thing when he was over in India, dies suddenly at age 32, and strangely had never named an heir. Now, he'd been so busy fighting, he didn't really have that line of succession all planned out with children and that kind of thing. So, who's going to take over the largest empire in the history of the world with no real heir to do it? Well, this is maybe a little bit of fiction here, but as it's written, Alexander was asked who should he leave his to whom should his empire go to, and famously Alexander said to the strongest, just a tough, great, harsh dude, and well, this empire is a little bit too big to handle for one person. At least that's the way it kind of came out. What ended up happening is four of his top generals ended up dividing the empire into four sections. Now, these sections definitely don't look even according to size, but according to power and what they really controlled, they were. Seleucus took over the whole eastern part of the empire here. This was his section. You've got Ptolemy, this emperor, or not emperor, this general, took over Egypt. Then you got Lysimachus. There we go. I knew I was going to screw that up. Lysimachus. He took over sort of the Asia Minor area with this very important stretch through here. And then you have Cassander, who took over Greece itself. These different generals were able to hold on to these different areas and actually pass them on to their own children for a while. Some were able to hold on longer, some not as long. But even though Alexander, his empire, his huge empire, really wasn't able to stay together that long, what was able to stay together is the Greek culture that he spread all around the world. As he would go conquer an area, Alexander sort of had a unique way to do it. One is he didn't necessarily want to kill everyone in the city, especially if you were willing to listen to Alexander. He was far more interested in making it quick and moving on. Now, if you were going to fight him, don't get me wrong, Alexander would take you down and take you down hard. But if you were willing to go along with his rule, Alexander would actually do a lot of positive things for your city, including bringing in the Greek knowledge, Greek ideas, Greek education, Greek philosophy, bring all these ideas into your city. He wouldn't necessarily make you get rid of yours, but the Greek ideas were some of the most advanced at the time, like we've talked about. And so a lot of cities and areas of the world were very excited and interested to get this knowledge coming in. One of the most important places is Alexandria. Well, which one of the 11? It's the one in Egypt. Alexandria in Egypt becomes the source of knowledge in the ancient world. Alexander builds this tremendous library in Alexandria and has all of the writing in the entire world brought to this library. Literally, the entire world, all the world that he conquered, which at that time was most of it. So when he'd conquer an area, he actually would have all the writings, all the education, all the different knowledge taken to that library in Alexandria. And then what they would do there is they would translate a lot of it into Greek. So this becomes a place where the most educated people in the world gather because they have access to all the knowledge, all the writing in the world. Imagine at that time, of course, with all the technology and internet and everything like that, this is basically the internet. This is Google in Alexandria. All the different education and writing in the world, you have access to it as a smart person. And this is where most of the very, very intellectual people of the time would gather, Alexandria. Many things start to advance during this Hellenistic time. One of these things is the arts and sciences, of course. They have access to all the knowledge of the world, and now you can imagine science and art start to boom. temples and palaces built big and grand like this one with that Greek architecture. Um, when you get more and more smart people together, a lot of times you can get even more smart ideas being created. And that's exactly what happened in Alexandria and other places like that. With access to all this knowledge, the knowledge just multiplies. Some of these people should sound familiar with coming up with some of these ideas. Advances in math and astronomy. One of the ideas is the heliocentric solar system. In other words, prior to this, everyone thought the Earth was in the center of the solar system and the sun goes around. Well, at this time, with a lot of the technology and science and math that they're able to come up with, the idea is no, that's not actually true. The sun is the center of the solar system, and this is one of the first times that this idea is really pushed forward. Pythagoras. His name might sound familiar, especially you math people, because he is the namesake of the Pythagorean theorem, calculating the sides of a right triangle. Then you've got Archimedes inventing a lot of different things and scientific things, but especially the levy and the pulley, the lever and the pulley, a lot of these simple machines that can do some very, very big things for building and working. Then we move to medicine. Hippocrates is a famous Greek physician, and not only did he do a lot of big things for gathering medical knowledge and advancing medical knowledge, but another thing that he's famous for today is something called the Hippocratic Oath. I will use my power to help the sick to the best of my ability and judgment. I will abstain from harming or wrongdoing any man by it. This is an oath of responsibility that doctors take even today. When a doctor is becoming a doctor, they must swear to this Hippocratic oath coming from this Greek Hellenistic time. So the idea that doctors will always use their abilities that they have for the greater good of people and never to harm. Greek culture continues to spread. If you think about our world today, Greek culture has slipped into movies, it's slipped into books, it's slipped into even the names of different things, our architecture for sure, buildings that use this Greek style, math, science, you name it. This Greek legacy is still very important to us today. And another thing that makes it very important is what is right next to it right here, the fact that this Greek culture spreads to the next great empire, which will be the Roman Empire. This is actually built by Rome, but you can see some of the similarities between Roman architecture of the Colosseum here and the Greek architecture right here of the Parthenon. Not only did Greece influence the entire world, thanks in large part to Alexander's big conquests, but it continues to influence today and influence the entire world history after it. So, this is Alexander's Empire and the Hellenistic Age. Make sure that you have these notes taken care of, and we will touch base soon.